The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that 1 in every 4 people is suffering from some form of mental illness right now. Over the course of a year, 4 different schools in San Diego conducted over 100 interviews with different people whose lives have been shaped from mental illness. These interviews were then used to create a play called Untold, featuring real plays and real people's stories. Tonight you will meet 4 of them.
To protect their identities, all but one of their names have been changed, but their words have not. Every story you hear tonight will be repeated, word for word, verbatim. We can't introduce you to everyone in the next 10 minutes, but we hope you hear something you haven't heard before.
It's cleansing to tell the story. These stories need to be told. We met dancing and dated for about 5 years. After about 5 years, the stuff in my husband's head started to bother him, started to show.
Alice Kincaid, activist and grandmother.
And there wasn't any help or agency he could go to, so we had a total nervous breakdown. We split and he was hospitalized for about 3 or 4 months. About 4 years later, we reconnected, got back together, and got married, and had 2 children, who witnessed a lot subsequently.
My first deployment was in 1999.
Peter McClure, Marine Corps veteran.
We trained in North Africa, which was probably the hottest I've ever been. And then my first time in combat, which everyone reacts to that differently. No 2 people are exactly the same. And then I was blown up in Iraq, 2006.
I was driving and I was making a left-handed turn when we were rear-ended violently from behind. He became very agitated and was like, "What's that?" It sounded like a bomb. I had an Accord and we were rear-ended by one of those big old Cadillacs, and it kind of bounced off of us, and I'll keep this short, but it triggered a PTSD episode, and 17 days later he took his life. And that's how Vietnam trailed him throughout his entire life.
My buddy was wounded on the same deployment I was wounded on, and he never fully recovered. He ended up taking his own life, and I'm the one who had to fly his body home. That was a pretty emotional period of time for me. He didn't die right in front of me, but the wounds the physical, emotional, and psychological wounds that he received on that deployment are what drove him to take his own life.
These stories need to be told. You youngsters need to know, because now you're in this bubble of high tech with games and violent games depicting war, and you're there with your thumbs on the controls, but in reality, this is what it really does. It affected me, it affected his parents, it affected our children, and what's interesting about Vietnam is because of the draft, more men went into the military than they do now. Our cousins, our uncles, our brothers, our boyfriends, our husbands, so many of the women of my generation married the men who brought these traumas home, and we created the children that are now the 2nd generation of the pain of Vietnam.
I have PTS, post-traumatic stress. So if you can imagine the mind as a tree, and you have this stress blowing against it, it's really, really hard, really powerful wind. Some people's minds will break, and for those people, they'll need years and years of counseling and medication and who knows what else. But then there's other people who, it's like defensive football. You gotta bend but not break. But know that it may never be straight up and down again. It may be better than it was when it was bent all the way over or broken, but I'll never be the same. You can use my real name. There's nothing to hide. There wasn't. Never.
Leia Zolina, mother of 2.
I don't think Jay struggled with any mental issues, because if he did, we would know. I mean, We're a very close-knit family. My husband's always with his children, and I'm always with them. So as far as mental struggles, I didn't see that in my son at all. We didn't see that in Jay. I mean, Jay, I could be at the gym exercising, and I hear all these other mothers complaining about their sons, and I just couldn't relate because my boys are just not like them.
I'd say it has taken me a really long time to figure out what good mental health looks like because I grew up without a good sense of what solid mental health looks like because my mother was bipolar.
Taylor Montgomery, 29-year-old worship leader.
Being sick. That's what we called it. It was just, oh, mom's sick. I didn't really understand what that meant. All I knew was that my mom would get really sad. Sometimes she couldn't even come out of her room. I think even as a kid, I was sad for her when I first found out because I thought, like, that's not fair. I want my mom to be able to go out into the sunshine. I want my mom to be able to play. I want my mom to enjoy what I enjoy.
You know, ever since it happened about a year ago, I've been thinking really hard if I missed anything. And honestly, I did not. I've asked my husband, I've asked my other son, nothing. If you're struggling mentally, there's going to be some symptoms. You're going to have some withdrawal. You won't be able to sleep, you'll be antisocial. But my son isn't like that. I'm sorry, I'm still saying isn't instead of wasn't.
My mom grew up in Africa, and the people there and the doctors there said that because she suffered from this since she was so young, I remember her saying that they once described her disorder as a monster that lives inside of her. That it was just so funny that they described it as a monster that lives inside of her that she needs to learn how to control. And she was my mom, so that's rough.
My son, my baby. I will never be the same. Never be the same. He's the youngest of the two. I'll miss those nights, you know, the good nights. I love you, Mom, when he came home. But, you know, I'm thankful.
I remember my sister being in the backyard yelling, "She's gonna kill me, she's gonna kill me." I remember thinking I wouldn't be surprised if she did. My mother and my sister fought like crazy. But then I saw her in the backyard with a knife. And I thought, what is she doing? So I ran into the backyard and I dropped to my knees and I said, "Mom, stop! Put down the knife." It was really scary. It's etched into me.
God has given me a great son. He's given me a great 17 years with my son. And I really just want to believe that it was his time to go. God needed him. And there's nothing that I could have done or anybody could have done to change him or to save him.
It was an event that even talking about it is hard because I can remember my mom's eyes. I can remember it was no longer my mom, but it was demonic. And it was just, I know it's a very, very, very weird way to describe it, but demonic. That's the only way I can describe it. It was dark and something. Like holding your breath. That's how I can describe it. It's like you hold your breath for a tornado and you hope that there's pieces left and survivors after.
I try to be brave, but it's hard, very hard. You know, I'm just trying to live again.
21% of us suffer from a seriously debilitating mental disorder. 46% of us will deal with some form of mental illness during our lifetime, and despite this, over 60% of us will never receive treatment.
1 in every 5 veterans deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan will develop PTSD or severe depression. Those numbers jump to 30% for Vietnam veterans. Even though we know these facts, veterans are still twice as likely to commit suicide.
In the last year, 7% of us have attempted, and 15% of us have committed suicide.
Live like him. Live like Chang. Be loving. Be a person who puts a smile on everyone's face. And hopefully people will remember how he has lived. Not how he went, but how he has lived.
It's cleansing to tell the story. You can donate to all the organizations that you want. You can write a check, but it's this one at a time. Like at a candle lighting ceremony where they start with 1 candle, and it's 2, and then it's 4, and you can get to 2,000 candles within about 5 minutes, but it all started with just 1. So that's all I am. Just one little candle.